series of panelists you'll hear from today. Myself, you'll also hear from Jonathan Newberry, who works in economic development with Albemarle County, and Rebecca Haydick from the Small Business Development Center. We expect to have about a 20 to 30-minute presentation and then address questions and answers. For those of you who have not been through this process before, you have a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions, feel free to type those questions into the Q&A section, and we'll address those as they're received. And if we miss any, Jennifer Schmack, who is behind the scenes helping make this program actually happen, will bring those to the forefront, and we'll try to leave no question unanswered. With that being said, I'd like to again welcome everyone, and we'll get started. So if you'll hit the next screen, JT. We thought it was important to provide some context about the Safe Spaces and Places grant, because it may help many of you determine if this is the right program for your business. As a historical perspective, back in July, the county launched a program called a Business Lift Grant. We received numerous applications. There were 57 grants that were provided to businesses throughout Albemarle County if they met a scoring threshold. And as such, we began processing those in August, and then sent the funds to those particular business in late August and maybe early September in certain cases. It's important to know that the recipients of those spent those funds on many different things, to include payroll, operational costs, paying the utility bill, etc., which we thought was fantastic. We also recognized a need to help improve the infrastructure for a lot of businesses so they could expand their footprint and be successful throughout the winter months. So we created something called a Safe Spaces and Places grant. Before I get into the details of that, I'll just mention that the Community Lift Grant happened in August 31st through September the 14th. That's a grant that's still in process for determining who will receive it, but it is for nonprofits. The Safe Spaces and Places grant was opened on Monday. Many of you may have submitted inquiries already. If you haven't, we encourage you to go through the inquiry form so you'll be invited to apply. The plan is for us to look at the first series of applicants on October the 2nd, and then the second tranche of applicants on October the 16th. And so we encourage you to apply sooner rather than later. Again, we'll look at these applications as they come in the door on an every 2-week cycle, and we expect to keep this program running until the funds are expended. The reason we wanted to share this information is to share with all of you on the call that there are a couple of other business grant opportunities that are coming down the pipeline that you may choose to apply for in lieu of a Safe Spaces and Places grant. We expect it to be a round 2 of the Business Lift Grant, as well as a round 2 of the nonprofit grant called a Community Lift Grant. We expect that to start on October the 5th with an application window through October the 19th, and then funds will be dispersed as people compile the necessary information for us to provide funding through direct deposit. So I'll pause there and see if questions have come up in the chat, and or if JT wants to weigh in on anything I may have missed. I see the first question is from in the chat: is nonprofit organizations eligible for this grant? The answer is no. This is for-profit businesses only that reside in Albemarle County. JT, do you have any other comments for the, the order?
No, thank you.
You go to the next slide, please. Since we're on the question of eligibility, as I mentioned before, you must be a for-profit business operating in the county, and you must have be in good standing with the county, meaning up to date on your taxes, no violations or any outstanding issues with the county in any way, shape, or form. You must be located in a non-residential zoning district and non-conforming zoning. You must have experienced a negative impact from the COVID-19 pandemic. You must be able to demonstrate that. We're seeking grant fund reimbursements between $5,000 and $25,000 to establish or expand temporary outdoor areas to conduct business. It's important to note that if you received previous funding, whether that be the PPP or the EIDL loan or other sorts of grants to pay for establishing an outdoor area or a temporary situation for your outdoor expansion, and those expenses were used to, those funds were used for those expenses, you would not be eligible for this particular grant. The easiest way, I think, for me to explain that is you can't use the same expense twice and get multiple grants for the same expense. It's important to emphasize finally that you must use these funds before December the 30th of 2020, and the projects must be operational by December 30th of 2020. The process itself, we're going to ask you to submit an inquiry form. Many of you have already done that. If you have not, you can find that link on the county's website. We will, of course, receive that into economic development. We'll forward you an application package that includes the request for a diagram of your outdoor drawing, a cost estimate, and we're also going to have a place for you to include your receipts if you've already incurred these expenses and you're asking for a reimbursement as opposed to a future expansion. As a reminder, these expenses must have been incurred between March 1st and December the 30th. The email will come from economicdevelopment@albemarle.org, and then we're going to provide you the next steps after we begin the communication process. I have a question in the chat that says, does this apply to temporary outdoor seating areas only, and how is this determined? It is not to outdoor seating only. In fact, anything that expands the footprint outdoors and creates commerce outdoors or economic development activity outdoors may be an eligible expense if it's determined that it meets the criteria in CARES regulations. So in the diagram that I mentioned before, you'll have to show the approximate location and label any elements that will be submitted on the cost estimate. We'll try to assist you as much as possible. In a few minutes, I'm going to introduce Rebecca Haydick and let her say a few words. She'll talk to you about the role the Small Business Development Center is willing to play, but in effect, they're willing to provide the support necessary to complete this application and or help in any way that your business may need. It's important to note that additional permits may be necessary based on the scope and scale of the request. For example, if you're running electrical conduit and electrical wires for your temporary tent and or heaters or whatever the case may be, it requires an electrical permit. Oftentimes, if the size of the tent exceeds 900 square feet, it'll require building permits. And there are other types of permit requirements that may pop up, which is why we're going to provide you instructions on how to proceed after we receive your conceptual plan. So JT, if you want to share a few examples with the folks on the call, and I'll take a look at the chat while you pull up some of those applicants. A question came up and said, as the landlord, can we apply to assist one of our tenants? The answer is yes. I'll also mention that if you're a landlord and your tenant wants to apply for one of these particular safe spaces grant, we're requiring that they get your approval to do so. Another question came in and says, will there be a webinar with details about the LIFT grant prior to the second round? The answer to that is yes, we will provide a webinar. JT, I'll turn it over to you because we have no open questions.
All right, thanks, Roger. I think that seeing some examples will hopefully generate ideas and really breathe life into some of the information that Roger has just shared. So economic development in developing the grant adapted its form based on a form that community development had created in response to the relaxation of ABC regulations for restaurants that wanted to expand outdoors and serve alcohol. So the form for the grant will look very similar to what you see on your screen right here. And we've had a lot of restaurants express interest in the grant, and this provides a perfect example of what would be an acceptable diagram for the purposes of the grant. So this is Timberwood Grill up Route 29 at Hollymead Town Center. They've used a portion of their site plan to show different additional tables and fencing that they've put up, and they've provided a diagram here. They've also included a narrative that talks about their hours of operation and how they're accommodating ADA access, the Americans with Disabilities Act. They go further even to show some photographs, some aerial photographs of the area that they're describing, as well as pictures, examples of the materials that they were going to use. So this was really a fantastic example of an acceptable diagram. Let's look at some other ones that are also good. This is Virginia Wine Works down Avon Street. This was their application to serve outdoors. Again, our application is going to look very similar, but you can see here, you can use a computer to draw your diagram. You can use just your freehand to draw your diagram, but uh, they've provided elements that help the reviewers orient themselves to their site. So you can see their warehouse and their tasting room. uh, this is the area of their additional outdoor seating. They've marked some of the dimensions between the tables, indicating that there's at least 6 feet between them. There's some other notes that are written on here. So the application will request specific information, and this is another example of an acceptable diagram. Uh, Champion Brewing, they this is another example of using an aerial photography and a computer to provide a diagram. Here, we really get a good sense of exactly what is being proposed. And the last one I wanted to show was Guadalajara on Route 29 North and Greenbrier. This was a place where they were planning to do some outdoor seating and contactless pickup. And again, you can see this is a hand a hand drawn example, but it kind of gives you, the more information that we have about where it is on your site that can kind of orient the reviewers to exactly what it is that you want to do, that will enable us to provide information about if any additional permits are required, or if any additional signage like no smoking or fire extinguishers are needed. The other thing, which I know Roger will talk about in just a second, here's to show you how much the applications look similar. This is the Safe Spaces and Places grant application. Um, there will be a request for a cost estimate for anything that's shown on your diagram. And so the last page of the application package has an example of um, costs that maybe you've already incurred. Maybe you already have a tent that you've put up, as well as costs that you plan to incur with the assistance of this grant. In this particular case, I'll zoom in a little bit, and we'll see that in the example, the tent and tables and chairs were costs that had already been incurred, and then the grant is requesting, I'd like to put out 4 patio heaters, and I'd like to request reimbursement for the wiring that's associated with, let's just say, some lighting that will illuminate the tent space during the evening hours. So those are some examples of diagrams. They run the gamut from, hand drawn to, using aerial photography and overlaying what it is that is being proposed. So I will jump back into the presentation, and we will move forward from there.
Thank you, JT. That was excellent. We had a question come in about round two of the Business Lift Grant. Will eligible companies that receive funds in round one be eligible for round two, or only new applicants? The answer is companies in round one will be eligible for round two as well. However, we do plan to give a preference to those that have not yet received grants in terms of eligibility for round two. If there's enough funding left over, we will consider applicants who received funds in round one to also be eligible to receive funds in round two if their expenses are eligible. Anonymous attendee asked, will businesses that have yet to open but will be opening during phase three be eligible? Though not yet impacted by COVID-19, they will be operating under the same restrictions and limitations. The answer to that is you must have an active business license in Albemarle County in order to be eligible for this. And provided that you are opening and be able to have all the installments completed before December the 30th, 2020, you would be eligible for consideration. Again, so the important thing there is that future expenses or expenses incurred before December the 30th are eligible without regard for the negative impact that happened prior. Can the grant funds be used to install permanent structures, wood patio cover instead of temporary tent? The answer to that is no. The permanent structures are not going to be eligible for a fast track permitting process and or approval. So we're only allowing temporary structures only to be eligible for this particular grant. Any permanent structures needs to proceed through the county's normal permitting process. And I think that concludes all the open questions. JT, I think you covered the cost estimate very well. No reason to go over that. We just wanted to give you some possible eligible expenses as an idea generator, as well as the things that we think clearly show they're related to COVID-19 expenses. Those would be the lease or purchase of tents, outdoor furniture, outdoor lighting, sanitizing stations, portable bathrooms, wayfinding signage, exit signage, extending your Wi-Fi. There's often something called external Wi-Fi that will allow for point of sale to occur outside. We believe that would be eligible. Point of sale systems that you may want to purchase so that you can have sidewalk sales or take restaurant payment outdoors, and any other elements that may promote safety and outdoor business activities. Just wanted to touch on outdoor heating for just a second, in that we have been talking in concert with the Thomas Jefferson Health District, and they provided some guidance as it relates to space heaters. They would prefer there be what's known as conductive heaters or radiant heating. Those fixed outdoor heaters that blow air across tables or across people are while they may be they're not ineligible, they're not the safest of the alternatives. So we'd prefer that you pick space heaters that you may find that have radiant heating, the umbrella types. And if you are going to have blowers on your heater, we'd want them to be able to be directive in which way you blow, so that the space heat itself doesn't blow across tables. It perhaps blows up your tent wall or whatever the case may be. Other points of interest may be as far as the tents, that if you do purchase a tent or lease a tent that have flaps on it, the Thomas Jefferson Health District determines that the flaps are down. That's the same scenario as being indoors, and so you would have limited capacity based off of what the local ordinances are and the governor's ordinances are, and all of the indoor ordinances would apply, mask, etc. If you purchase or lease a tent that is open air, then outdoor ordinances would apply, meaning provided you can stay 6 feet apart, mask wouldn't be required, is one example. Can you explain what you meant by experienced negative impact by COVID? Only financial impact, or can it be explained in other ways? Impossible operations would be an example of one. Yeah, you just the way the restrictions are written, you must have be able to demonstrate harm caused by COVID. Most often, the easiest way to do that is financial. I would say that if you, for example, closed your business for a period of time, that would be a hardship that would be eligible for consideration. And JT, could you think of some other examples that the folks on the call may want to consider?
Well, the Community Investment Collaborative, who will help us disperse this grant, has really been our partners in evaluating COVID impact. Many businesses have demonstrated loss of revenue by providing financials to them. But your question was asking, is there anything beyond financial impact? And I think there is, and a narrative explaining the particular circumstances of how your business was impacted would allow the county's compliance team to evaluate whether it meets the specific thresholds that we want to meet in order to determine compliance with the CARES Act. We wouldn't want the absence of a financial impact to stop you from expressing interest in the program and explaining to us what that impact has been, and so we can validate it through the county's compliance team.
I've got a couple other questions coming in before we go through the timelines. Will this webinar be recorded and available later? Yes, it is being recorded. I'm going to ask Jennifer to pop in and talk about the best way to access this video. I don't know if we're going to post it on the county website, the EDO website, or both, but we'll make it available. Jennifer,
Yes, we will post it on the Enable. Well, we will post a link of the recording on the Enable Albemarle website. I will put a link in the chat as well.
Thank you, Jennifer. Does this program include businesses within the city limits? The answer is no, it does not. The business must be located in Albemarle County and have a Albemarle County business license. When and how will the applications be provided? Once you complete the inquiry form, our team receives your letter, your interest. We'll send you the application directly. We purposefully want to do this this way so that we have a single point of contact with who to work with. So you will receive the application via email. Does to-go business count, for instance, temporary cover for pickup area and walk away? Yes, the answer would be provided the expenses incurred were $5,000 or greater for that particular scenario. We certainly would want businesses to set up outdoor contactless services. I think that's all the questions in the chat for now. The program timeline, we announced it on this particular Safe Spaces grant on September the 22nd. We're asking for deadlines for the applications for October the 2nd, be received by October the 1st. We expect there to be feedback and approval in the second week of October, and the grants will begin, the funds will be dispersed in mid to the end of October. We expect construction, inspection, and uploads receipts to begin shortly thereafter. It's important to mention again that we are requiring receipts be submitted to make sure the funds were spent as agreed. A couple other things I think is important before I introduce Rebecca Haydick. That is that the Thomas Jefferson Health District has a hotline. It's 434-972-6261. Again, that's 434-972-6261. So if you have questions about the public health and the best way to protect your customers, feel free to contact them directly. Also of import is if you have questions that you wanted to ask our staff, you can reach us through economicdevelopment@albemarle.org. That's economicdevelopment@albemarle.org. And for those of you who are attending by phone, our phone number at the Economic Development Office is 434-972-4016. That's 434-972-4016. And also now I'm going to introduce Rebecca Haydick to say a few words. Rebecca's team has agreed to serve as a resource for those of you who are looking for assistance to apply for this program and talk about other questions that you may have related to the program eligibility and or maybe county policies as well. So Rebecca, if you'd like to say a few words and introduce SBDC in your role, we greatly appreciate it.
Sure. So I am Rebecca Haydock. I'm the director of the Central Virginia Small Business Development Center, and I'm simply here to say that we are the local business resource office that's available to help your business. So if you need assistance with your application, if you want to look at what is the highest and best use of the funds, if you want to put together your financials, but our office is an office of business and technical experts that are available to help you, as well as we have access to all types of resources, be it identifying new markets, looking into your current marketing plan, doing business online, basically any aspect of business development, we're here to help you. So please feel free to call our office if you'd like some assistance or just someone to bounce your ideas off of to try to come up with the best use of funds. And our office, again, is Central Virginia Small Business Development Center. And our website is that exact alphabet soup, which is cvsbdc.org.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. For those who are participating on this webinar, this concludes our prepared material, and we're just going to sit silently for a few minutes to see if there are any other questions before we conclude. Feel free to enter those into the Q&A session, and we'll wait a minute or two to see if any other questions come in. And while we're waiting, I'll ask JT or Jennifer if they have any other remarks that they believe would be appropriate. Jennifer, any other comments you'd like to make?
I do not have anything additional to add.
Thanks. JT, anything else?
I think the only thing that I think I would like to add is that, you know, if you're confused about the process, if you're curious, if you're eligible, you know, we're trying to get the CARES Act money out into the community in a way that's compliant with the federal regulations, but we want to assist you in making those evaluations. And Rebecca and her team are a resource. Jennifer, Roger, and I are a resource to you as well. Feel free to give us a call, send us an email, and we're getting a lot of questions these days, but we will get back to you as soon as we can and see how we can figure out if an application would make sense for you.
JT, this question may be directed to you and Jennifer. We had one pop up in the chat. It says, when will we get the application package itself?
Yes, so we were hopeful to use the Q&A from our webinar today to cover any questions that are not currently covered in the application materials or arise as a very common question that's not currently reflected in the materials. So we'll be sending the application package out later this afternoon, but we didn't want to send the application package out without hearing from many of the people who have already expressed interest and making sure that it was going to include the information that people were most interested in.
Next question we have is, we're located in the town of Scottsville with a Scottsville business license, pay county property taxes. Are we eligible to apply? The answer is yes, you're eligible to apply. Looks like we've answered all the questions. Give it just a second. I don't see any more compelling questions. So with that, I'll say thank you for your interest in this particular Safe Spaces and Places grant. We're very hopeful our team can help your business survive. If you have any questions or comments, again, economicdevelopment@albemarle.org, 434-972-4016. With that, I will conclude the call, this informational webinar, and wish all of you a good day. Goodbye to y'all.